Assalamu alaikum, Mufti Saab. You are on mute.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan. I would have went through the whole lesson on mute. Jazakallah khairan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa barik wa sallim. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, previously we were talking about fate. We were talking about taqdeer and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. Yet at the same time, we also have the ability to choose our own actions. So this is a very delicate balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He's the creator of everything and He knows everything. Yet He still gives us the ability to choose. Right, so this is a very difficult concept for us to fully grasp and fully understand, and in reality, we can't fully understand it. Right, the absolute understanding of our own free will, that is very difficult for humans to grasp, and that is like grasping what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, like the absolutely how great Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is. That is beyond human capacity to fully understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that even the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam, who are the closest to Allah and who know Allah the most, they also don't know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 100%, meaning every single thing. Because to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you'd have to know all of His sifat, His attributes, and His attributes of perfection are, they're limitless in reality. Yeah, we have the 99 names, we have the sifat and attributes of Allah, but that is human understanding, how we can get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. Not that this encompasses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is beyond our capacity to encompass Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, there are certain things that we cannot fully grasp and fully understand. Another thing, that may help with us, to understand this, is that human beings can't fully understand the concept of infinity, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is eternal. To fully grasp that, it's extremely difficult. We can say it and we can understand what the word means. We understand what eternal means. But if we were to sit and we were to contemplate, what that actually means and what it means to live forever and ever, khalidina fiha, in Jannah or Jahannam, that is, beyond human capacity. So just like that qasb that we talked about last week, qasb, which is our free will, that is something that's very difficult to grasp. These examples, inshallah, that we'll talk about are to bring us closer to it, to get us to at least, have contentment at heart when we discuss the issue. So here are 5 different examples, inshallah, that may help us understand our own free will and the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not forcing us in our actions. He knows what we're going to do. He allows us to do it, and He creates those actions. And He already knows in the future what choices we are going to make. So that is the aspect that is extremely difficult for us. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows, isn't it that we're forced? So these are examples to try to help with that. And before starting these examples, I will give my own example, which is a little bit silly, but I'll give it in after maybe the first one. So the first example here is the example of a murderer, right? So how does this relate to qasb? We'll see, inshallah. So a murderer, or a person, he has a gun and he shoots someone and he kills another person. So there's this man, he shoots and kills an innocent person, right? So he's a murderer. And if you have clear evidence that that person did that, then no matter where you are in the world, every court system is going to pass the judgment that this person, he's going to be punished. Now the punishment may differ, life in prison or, the death penalty or whatever it may be. But every court system is going to say this person is guilty, right? He shot the person. He took a gun, he pointed it at another innocent person and took that person's life. And he's going to get punished. But if we observe this, this murder, the murderer who has the gun, he didn't, the gun itself, the bullet that was in the gun, the whole process of the gun itself, everything that the gun does, they're not the creation of the killer, right? The murderer, he didn't make the gun. He didn't create the bullet. He didn't create the power that is within the gun. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all of these, like the actual materials that went into it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything. So he created the materials that go into and create and to form this gun. So the murderer, what did the murderer do? What the killer did is he pulled the trigger, right? That is what he did. And then when he pulled the trigger, the processes went through, the bullet came out, it wounded the innocent person, the victim. So the murderer, he did not cause the wound. He did not cause the bullet to come out. He did pull the trigger, but it is possible if you pull a trigger that the gun could jam up. So the fact that all of these processes happen, the bullet comes out, these are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is allowing to happen, right? Even the fact that he pulled the trigger. But if we look at any court system, they will all say that this person is guilty. He is a murderer. For what reason though? The real reason is because he pulled that trigger. So pulling the trigger, out of all of those actions, the gun itself, the bullet coming out, wounding the person, causing the person to, be taken to the IR or the ER emergency room, and then he's, he dies because of that. He didn't do any of that. He just pulled the trigger. So, however, we say that pulling the trigger is enough to determine that this person is guilty. So the same way, when we do a sin, we don't create our environment. We don't create the ability for ourselves to sin. We don't create the sin itself. So what are we really doing? The only thing that we're really doing is we're pulling the trigger, for a term, but we're pulling the trigger. We're intending. And because of that intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, if it's a good intention, we're going to get rewarded. If it's a bad intention, we're going to be punished. So this concept of being rewarded or punished because of qasb itself, and this is what's called qasb, our free will. Free will is qasb. So, it makes sense. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he creates everything. Even when we perform salah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is allowing that to happen. He's creating these actions. We don't create the salah that we perform. Even the movements of my hand, these are Allah allows that to happen and he creates it. But I am rewarded or I will be punished, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us all, because of the intention that I make. So this example here about the murderer is to highlight that, we don't do every single thing. All we do is that small thing, that intention, but that small thing is so weighty. It has so much, either value or merit, or it has so much, weight to it, that will decide, that will be the deciding factor whether this person is innocent, guilty, rewardable, etc. So, that is the first example to show us that just a small intention, that is enough to be punished or rewarded. And that's why the first hadith we've done in the Al-Arba'in, al-A'malu bin-Niyat, all actions are according to that intention. That is why the intention is so important. So that is the first example, and it's to highlight that we are rewarded or punished based off of qasb. Now, the second example, the girl shopping for a dress. Right? This was an example that our teacher shared with us when I was studying, just to explain to us about taqdeer. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows where we're going to end up. Right? Allah knows if we are going to Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows if we're going to Jahannam, right? So, that is very difficult for us to fathom, that already my destination is known. But this example, inshallah, will help us understand that. So my teacher, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve him, he said that, in an example, that a father takes his daughter to buy a dress. And when he goes to the store, there are 3 dresses. In this example, 3 dresses, all similar, but different in color. So you have a red dress, a blue dress, and a green dress, right? 3 different colors. Now, the father, he already knows the daughter's favorite color. He knows that she really likes green, and she's always happy with green. So what the father has already done is he spoke to the manager of the store, and he's already reserved the green dress. He says, I'm gonna get the green dress, make sure no one buys that. So he already has reserved it. Despite the fact that he's already reserved it, he still asks her, which one do you want? And so you got the red, blue, and green one. And she says, I want the green one, right? Just as the father knew she would. And then the father gives the cash for the green one, and then they go home, right? And she takes the dress. So in this example, you see, the choices are there. The dresses, they represent our possible actions that we can take. That daughter, was she forced to choose the green dress? She was not forced at all. She wasn't forced. She could have easily chosen the red one. She could have easily chosen the blue one, but she chose the green dress. So the colors, these different dresses, they can, in this example, they will represent our possible actions. The fact that the father had knowledge and that he reserved that dress, that is an example of taqdeer, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what, choices we are going to have. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows more than the father knew about in this example, it is possible that the father's understanding is mistaken. When it comes to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not mistaken in his knowledge. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge and the fact that he knows what choices we're going to make all the way till the end, till Qiyamah, that is, this is an example of that. And, the fact that the daughter said that, I want the green one, that is an example of qasb. We have the free will. And ultimately that the father, he finally purchased it for her. That is our understanding of qada, that the decision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a very powerful example. You have many choices in life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already knows. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not forcing us to make the decision, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows it to happen, but he knows that what we're gonna choose. Right? So that is the example of the daughter with the dress, which I think is a very powerful example, despite that she had complete free will and out of her own volition, she chose that green one, and the father had already reserved it. Another example of Shaykh Shabbir Ahmad Uthmani, rahimahullah, is a great scholar in the recent past. He said, he gave an example of like a train station, for taqdeer. He said that there's a schedule, right? You can see the schedule in a train station, or let's take an airport. In our times, we have the airport. So you have a certain schedule that this plane is going to take off at this time, that plane is going to take off at that time. Let's say, for instance, a plane is going to take off at 10 a.m. And then when 10 a.m. came, the plane took off, right? Just as on schedule, the plane took off at 10 a.m. Now, the fact that the plane was scheduled to leave at 10 did not strip the pilot of his choice to start the plane and go, right? Just because it's written on a wall or written on the computer or whatever that the plane will leave at 10 a.m., it doesn't force the pilot to start the engine, to get ready, and to fly it at 10 a.m. He still has a choice. If he wants, he could actually just, not do it. But he still does it according to schedule. So the knowledge of something that, the fact that something is going to happen, it doesn't stop that person from having a will. So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we're going to do, all the actions that we do, and ultimately where we end up in life, in Jannah or Jahannam, or where we end up. This does not mean that Allah is forcing us to do these actions. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to act out, right? To do whatever we want. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates those actions. Now, another question may come to mind that, well, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows where we're going to go, then why does he allow us to do these actions, right? Why doesn't he make us do the good actions? This is because this life is a test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this life as a test. He wants to see which one of us is truthful in the pact that we made. Remember, we talked about, we made a pact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you are our Rabb, our Lord, and we're going to worship you. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to test us. So he made us forget that, the pact, but the pact is still binding. And he has sent us to dunya. And so he creates whatever action that we do, even if it's good or bad, because this is a test. And there's another example coming up that will highlight that a little bit more. So this example of the plane or the airport, it is to display the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows something. It doesn't stop the thing from happening, meaning it doesn't mean that the thing is forced. And here's my example. This is not one of the 5. It's a little bit silly because it's not practical. It's not going to happen. But we can all relate to this because of, all the movies and everything that, Hollywood puts out. So my example is basically, let's say, for instance, someone creates a time machine, right? Someone creates a time machine, and you, like right now, it's the night, right? You go into the time machine and you go one day before. So you can go 24 hours back in time. So you step into the time machine and you travel 24 hours back in time. So now you're in Tuesday at the same time, 7:35. Now what's going to happen is, what's going to happen on that day. Everything that's going to happen. How are you going to wake up? What people are going to say, what people are going to eat, the different events that happen, at least in your sphere, in your life, what's going to happen at work. You're going to know everything because you went into the time machine. But now, since you know everything, does that mean that you're causing everything to happen? You're forcing everyone to do stuff now? You're forcing this person to have Fruit Loops in the morning, or you're forcing this person to, yell at that person at work. You're not forcing anyone. You just know because you were in the time machine. So your knowledge has increased. That's all. And you know everything that everyone's going to do. So this is a very crude example, but it highlights the fact that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows something, and he further allows them to happen, but the fact that he knows what we're going to do does not mean that he's forcing us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not force us to do things. He gives us free will. So that does not contradict the fact that he knows what we're going to choose. So that is an example of, the time machine. You can add that in there, in between 3 and 4, the example of the time machine. So that is to highlight the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't force. Okay, so now the next example, the ant on a string. So this is an example that our mufti, who is the main mufti in our institution, he wrote this in one of his books, and he actually quotes another scholar, and he's like unsure which exact which scholar he got this from, but the example is, imagine there's a string, right? There's a string which has 3 colors, right? So it's a long string. In the first third, that string is one color. It's white. Then in the middle, the string is red. And then at the end, the string is black. So you got white, red, black. It doesn't matter what the colors are, but it's white, then red, then black. As soon as one on the string, when one color finishes, the next one starts. You got white finishes, red finishes, black. And then you see that, the string is in air, and then there's an ant walking on the string. So the ant is walking on the white. So you are just there, you're standing and you're watching the string, and you can see the colors, you can see everything, and you see the ant walking. So as you see this ant walking, as soon as it finishes the white portion, you see it and it's going to the red portion. And then as soon as it's finished walking on the red portion, it starts walking on the black portion. So you're watching all this and you know what's happening. You know that ant is going to finish the white, he's going into the red. He's going to finish the red, he's going into the black. You can clearly tell because, and in this example, the ant just keeps walking in one line. It's not going to turn around. So the fact that you're watching this, right, you're seeing what's happening and you can already tell, okay, I know what's happening. I know what he's going to do. And you know the stages that this ant is going to go through. So these colors, you can consider white as the past, the red as the present, the black as the future. You can see everything that this ant is doing. And you're not forcing the ant. You're not telling the ant you have to move in this fashion. He's just walking on his own accord. He's not being forced. So similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees us walking on our path in life. We have a past, we have a present, we have a future. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows where we are and which position in life and where we're going to be. Just like when you're watching that string, you can understand that ant is going to reach the black. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows this about every single aspect of his creation, and he's known that for eternity. If you can sit there and contemplate this is just the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every single thing, every single atom, and just this particle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows exactly what's going to happen to that, where it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And this is just really amazing. So that is an example of the string and the ant, and it highlights the fact that Allah knows, and just because of that doesn't mean that we're forced. Just like the ant is not forced to walk, it walks on its own volition. All right, so then that is the fourth one and the last example. And we're going to stop, inshallah, after this example. So this one Shaykh who's currently in Turkey, very mashallah, great Shaykh in the field of ilm al-kalam and aqidah and beliefs. He gave the example of an oral exam, right? So an exam that a teacher is giving. So in this exam, the teacher asks the student, he calls one student at a time, right? The student sits in front of the teacher. The teacher will read different questions to the student and present the choices, like a multiple choice, like A, B, C, or D. And the student will give the answer and the teacher will mark it down, right? So that is the scenario. Teacher calls a student, reads out the question, different answers are read out, student chooses, and teacher writes down what the student has chosen, right? So for instance, if the student, the teacher will read out the question, student says, I choose B. So the teacher writes B in the answer sheet, he'll write B for the student. Then the teacher asks the second question. Student says, okay, now I choose A. So then the teacher is going to write down, student chose A for number 2, so on and so forth, right, to the end of the exam. Now, whatever the student chooses, the teacher also writes that down. If the student says, I want B, and then the teacher writes A, that's not a fair exam. The teacher is forcing the student then. That's forcing. Student didn't choose B, now the teacher is writing the wrong answer for the student. That's not honest. But in this scenario, whatever the student says, the teacher writes that down, right? After the exam, the teacher examines the test and he will grade each student's quiz or their exam. Then if the student passes, then they can proceed to the next grade or whatever. If they're in 10th grade, they go to 11th grade, etc. If they fail, then they're punished. They have to repeat it, right? So this is the example that he gave. Now, what are the morals that we can take from this example? Number one, the student didn't write a single thing. The student didn't write anything. The teacher is the one that wrote the answers for the student. So, and the teacher did this out of his own, his own will. The teacher said, I am going to write your answer. And the teacher did that for the student. The only thing that the student did is he chose. The student chose. That's the only thing the student did. The exam, the multiple choices, the writing of the answer, all of that is from the teacher. The only thing the student did was he said, I want A or I want B. Similarly, in our situation, we don't create the scenarios. We don't create the choices that come to us. We don't, create our physical actions, but we do choose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the choice. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows that to happen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates it and he writes it down. And on Qiyamah, it's going to be like the report card. Like, here's your exam. This is where you failed. This is where, or you passed here. You did well. You did these right. These are things where you did wrong. The same thing like the exam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does everything just like, the teacher. But, this example is a bit different. And I'll tell you that the difference between this example and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's test for us, right? What is the difference? Is that human beings gain knowledge and that they don't have. So what does that mean? The teacher needs to ask the student, like, hey, what do you want? This is question number one. These are the choices. What is your answer? The student will then say, A. So then the teacher will write it down. As for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he already knows. So before even asking us, he doesn't have to say, hey, what do you want? Then I'll write it down for you. He already knows what we're going to choose. And that is already in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the question comes in, then why does he test us then? Why didn't we just go directly to Jannah or Jahannam? The answer to that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one can call him unjust. No one can call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala an oppressor. Because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to see our own actions. We're in this dunya, we can see our own actions and we will do them. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly put us into, na'udhu into Jahannam, then we'll say, oh Allah, this is oppression. We didn't deserve this. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based off of, his knowledge, he allows us to do all of this, then we won't have any kind of complaint, right? We will be guilty. So this is the test, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the test, despite the fact that he already knows. And that is so we cannot complain against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here another point is that the teacher in this example, he had to ask the student what the student's answer was. Right? That's what I just said, right? And that's because the teacher's knowledge is limited. If the teacher already knew everything, he already knows what the student is going to say, then it would not be wrong for the teacher to write down what the student is going to say. If he's absolutely sure he already knows, like let's say you do the time machine thing, right? The teacher stepped in a time machine, he went one day before and he remembers all of the answers. He can go ahead and just write all the answers down that the student is going to say. And then, if he wants to make sure, he can go and ask the student again, he will see this the same thing. So if the teacher had the knowledge, then he could go ahead and write it beforehand. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already has the knowledge. But this does not mean that we're forced in our action, right? So this is what, I wanted to share, the fact that we're not forced in what we do. Neither is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unaware of what we are going to do. So he knows exactly what we're going to do, and we are free to do those actions. So this is what, this is what we believe in. And this is a very hard and difficult concept to grasp. But inshallah, we just, use these examples to help us out. That's all we need, really. We just need to have that strong belief and conviction in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to apply this and to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our belief and have complete conviction and faith in him. وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى على خير خلق محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.